Paltrocast.
Gerry, Dewey, Gerry. Thank you both for doing it. I'll start with Dewey, a two-parter. One, how are you? And two, are you okay with compliments today? Because you're going to get a bunch of them.
How are you? Well, I'm fine, thank you, Darren. And who doesn't like compliments? Thank you.
Sometimes artists just don't want any compliments. They want the gloom and the doom. So Gerry, I'll throw it at you first. The compliments and the well wishes. Now, I love the band America. I think you guys have a very difficult task that you've been pulling off for a long time, which is looking back and pushing forward at the same exact time. So, for example, the Encore Tour 2025, but at the same time, the documentary, the Hearts reissue, the Live from the Hollywood Bowl reissue, etc. So Gerry, when did you kind of realize that America was going to be an all-consuming business, not just, hey, we come on stage and play songs?
Well, that came in stages, Darren. There was quite a few years ago, I think Dewey will agree, when we realized that after 10 or 15 years, the live show was just getting better and better. And I hate to use the word, it became a business. But for us, it became a reality. It was a real regular part of our lives and our year and stuff. So that kind of kicked in quite a few decades ago now. But I have found, and Dewey might agree, that as much as at this point in our lives, professionally and personally, there's far more to look back on. There's so much going on from here and forward that I don't really have a lot of time to kind of look back. Do you agree, Do? There's a
Yeah,
lot
there
still on
is
the
so much
table.
water. Yeah, there's so much water under the bridge, 55 years technically. We're in 2025,
Yeah.
started in 70, straight out of high school, the history and everything. But that's an awful long time. And you don't know until you get there what you're going to be thinking, right? That's what life is all about. And it is real hard to compartmentalize some of these eras in our career. Right now we're in another one. I never in my wildest dreams expected to be fronting the band uh, without Gerry, but it's worked out fine. And Gerry knows
The way he's without Jerry.
without Gerry,
Well,
yeah, we were always
when,
a team. And I mean, obviously we lost Dan Peake. He'd left the band before and has since passed away, and that
right.
that door is closed. Jerry's still here, obviously, and we're still hanging out and pals. We just had dinner the other night with some of our friends. But it's a work in progress, even though Jerry's always recording. I don't write and record nearly as much, and I never was that prolific in that regard. But I do enjoy playing. And after COVID, Jerry and I talked about this. After COVID, I got pretty itchy to do something.
Mhm.
And and Jerry was forthcoming with me and said, it hasn't bothered me not doing it. And of course, Jerry has physical things too, where he lives in Australia half the time with Sally and his family down there. And so
Mhm.
it's not as easy to gear up. I'm out here in California and the rest of the old band players are here. So it gives the guys work to do. I satiate my desire to keep playing a little bit and there's we make some money out of it. Jerry and I have a deal.
To call it a machine is a
Yep.
little bit disrespectful because, and obviously I was there for over a half a century, it's made up of incredibly talented people. And
Mhm.
there's all of this chemistry of who gets along. It's not really, people are surprised when you say it's not about chops, how great a guitarist you are. There's so many more important things about personalities and spending time together that we built this is where I use the word, this incredible machine over the years that is as good or better than it ever was. So it wasn't a case of, it's kind of looking a little shaky. The wheels are coming off. Time to wrap it up. In fact, our dear friend Andy Barr, who was out with Dewey all last year and will be again, excuse me one sec, will be again um, next year. Or this year, sorry,
This year.
is fantastic. He toured with us as a lead guitarist a few years ago, and we already knew and loved Andy, and he has a beautiful voice. So it allowed me the comfort of going, okay, I know that that's being handled very, very well. I already knew every other piece of the puzzle, of course.
Right. Well, I'm going to come back to this Era's question, but to follow up when you're talking about with the machine, I remember when your drummer Ryland, he's still in the band, correct?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. When Ryland first joined, I was a massive fan, not only of America, but of Real Big Fish. And I went, that ska guy is in America.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Punk
Yeah.
ska guy, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, the reason that came about because I had known Ryland for over 10 years because he had played in a variety of bands with my son Matt Beckley. And they
Oh,
were in a power trio together. And Dewey, I had introduced Ryland to Dewey, and I said, "This is the dude. We're not gonna rush Willie. Willie had been with us over 40 years. Willie's gonna kind of let us know physically when it's really no." So I used to tell Ryland every year, just keep watching those DVDs and stuff because job's yours when it becomes available, you know. And there was just a
wow.
right time, and it was, and now it's been what, a decade or so do with Ryan.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, I was thinking that too. I'm not even sure how many years is it, 11 or 12 with Rylan on drums? I mean,
Time's flying.
time is flying. Yep.
The
I think,
ska guy is doing well. So back to the whole eras thing. Growing up on Long Island, I think like clockwork, every year you'd go, okay, look at the summer calendar. America's playing Westbury Music Fair with Air Supply or the Little River Band or something like that every year. But then being a massive music person, 05, 06, whatever it was, when I saw about the Here and Now album and went, wow, these guys are taking a big chance working with cool artists, some outside writers, etc. And then around the same time that that was happening, the whole yacht rock thing, which weirdly you guys are categorized, started happening. So in other words, America kind of went indie in a way about
Yeah.
20 years ago. Is that one of the eras that you're talking about and seeing the changes going from quote unquote classic act to a mix of classic and modern?
That was a gift in many, many ways. Dewey and I have obviously done albums. The time between albums was getting longer and longer. But when Adam Schlesinger came on board, he had
Mhm.
such respect in the business, and Dewey and I were already such big fans that all of a sudden the phone's ringing with Ryan Adams and Ben
Jim
Folds and
James,
Jim
yeah.
James, My Morning Jacket.
Ben Queller, you know.
Ben Queller, and it turned into the challenge, if anything, was to not have it become a duets album, you know, because that was not really the intent. And I loved James Eha's wording. He said it isn't to make a retro project; it's to make a timeless album, which I think they did a great job. So yeah, I like to think of that as an era. That era, particularly about the height of tragedy and that we lost Adam, you know, and but
Right.
I have the greatest memories of that time, and it did. I saw Jim James do it the other day. I had one of those lovely dinners with Brian Wilson, and
Oh,
there's
yeah.
always really great guests. And one of the guys from Fleet Foxes, the main guy in Fleet Foxes, I met, and I met Jim James for the first time. So
Wow, that's
a
cool.
nice
Yeah.
chat. Yeah.
I've never met them, never run into them, haven't seen them live. We did
They were
this.
the only
Oh,
group on that project that we didn't see. That Dewey and I were continuing to do shows on the weekends, and we missed the day that Jim and the band came in and tracked Golden on that album. So they are the only ones. Whereas we worked extensively with Ryan Adams and Ben and
I loved singing that song. That was an interesting change for me. Singing any other outside material, because we're
Yeah.
known for writing our own songs, and
Right.
you always write in your comfort zone, basically, you know, with vocal range and etc. And your melodies are your own. But that was a little curious melody on Golden for me, and I thought it was great. And that is a good debarkation, if you will, that project, like you're saying, Darren.
Mhm.
Kind of when we did that, there was a lot of new elements to that project. First time we recorded in New York, right, Jer?
yes, yeah,
At
And
Stratosphere Sound, Adam's old
that,
studio.
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
in
so
Chelsea.
the day-to-day goings-ons were a different comfort zone, if you will, or not comfort zone, whatever. Different for us because we always recorded on the West Coast or at Jerry's house somewhere. But the eras that I always think of are the big chunks in the beginning, the Warner Brothers years,
Hmm.
7 years, and then the Capitol years. I think there were 8 there or something. And then it
The
starts,
George Martin era, that I would
Right.
George
kind of,
Martin era was
that was 7
absolutely,
straight projects, I think.
yeah. Uh, and then, yes, as with any artist, I mean, we were so grateful, you know, and frankly surprised I am that it's been so long and we still have such a great following. And you still see Spotify plays and all these things. It's like, we just kind of found a niche, and gratefully the music transferred to the listener to that degree that it's passed on for generations, because that's the real tell, isn't it? I mean, I read a
Yep.
lot of books and biographies and music history stuff. I'm reading a thing about Van Morrison in 1968 and that era, and all the artists that are talked about in that, and bands. So many of them were the happening thing at the time, Ultimate Spinach. Yeah, whatever happened to Ultimate Spinach? But
Don't
but
know.
not everybody has that great benefit of transferring generationally. So it's a fascinating reality that we're living in.
I was listening to a podcast yesterday. It's a review of a new book on Nick Drake, and Dewey and I have a bit of a connection there because we were in London at the same time. Anyway, it's a lovely book apparently, but it was our dear friend Pat Sansone from Wilco talking about it. And the guy hosting the podcast is from a group called Holy Sons. Lovely,
Mhm.
very informed guy. I don't know him, but he was talking about where he was musically at that time, Dewey, and Nick Drake. And he says, and I was deep into Bread and America and maybe
Wow.
even the Carpenters. And I thought,
Wow.
wow,
Yeah.
we are kidding. And I thought, I'll take that, You want to put us in that group, that's fine with me, It
I
wasn't
just saw
in a derogatory way at all.
we
Right.
Penny, my wife Penny, and I just watched recently the Karen Carpenter biography. And frankly, that wouldn't have been something that really grabbed my attention for no other reason that they were kind of middle of the roady. But frankly, we were in their era, and we were, but it was a fascinating biography. It's like, it really, you see the Sinead O'Connor, when I mentioned to you, Jerry, a few years back, I watched her biography. Things that I were out of my area of real deep interest. I knew superficially about their careers and their hits and things, but it's
Yeah.
amazingly complex. The Carpenters had a very complex career.
Now, what's our common denominator between Carpenters and us? There's a real
Well, I would say amazing drum sounds
well,
from bands.
it's Hal Blaine and Joe Osborne. Yeah,
Oh yeah, the Wrecking Crew stuff, right?
yeah. We shared
Yeah.
that. Yeah, that's an honor.
Well, the drum sounds on Sister Golden Hair, amazing. Is that Hal Blaine?
No, that's Willie. And I
Really?
can tell you that that's one of my production tricks I learned years ago is just to not have everybody jump in after 1, 2, 3, 4. I learned how to build a pop song, and one of the tricks was you hold the drums off for a little while, have the drums come in on the second verse or something. Whereas if they're in from bar one, you're used to it. So Dewey and I would watch every night, every guy in the audience kind of air drum that
Yes.
Willie's intro to that. And it was suggested, well, that worked. That was exactly what it was for. Yeah, Willie Leacox, rest in peace.
Yeah.
Well, another not connected to anything that we're talking about, but another pop culture foothold that I believe America is responsible for is being the name source of Jesse the Body Ventura. Have you heard that one?
Yeah, I heard that.
Is that true? Is that something you've heard verified?
But there's a couple of these. That one I can't give you the quote. Don't keep it on file. But the one that comes up even more is the Purple Rain one. And I swear when that first kind of surfaced, there was some reference, but I haven't dug it up. But there was some, I don't think I'm dreaming that Prince referenced that it came from Dewey's Ventura Highway lyric.
Yeah, I think that one was a little more solid rumor or fact, I think, than the Jesse Ventura thing. I don't know.
Then again, Prince did borrow Purple Rain, as the story goes, from Faithfully by Journey, and he kind of got permission. So if he was listening to Journey, he probably was also listening to America.
Yeah,
It was in the air, man.
It's in there.
Purple Rain thing.
Dewey was very close with Steve. In fact,
Steve
by the
Perry.
way, that same dinner, Dewey, with Jim James, Steve Perry. Hadn't seen Steve in years.
Oh yeah, he was there too. Yeah.
Talk about a gathering.
Did Steve
I
Perry
lived in-
talk about rehabbing houses?
No, we didn't. Yeah, no, I mean, it's
Doing
a
that lately?
big table with lots of interesting people.
He's a
but-
real estate mogul now. I'm gonna have to call him.
There's amazing stories. I don't know if this is just comedy, but one of the best podcast guests ever, whether or not you love his band, is Josh Homme from Queens of the Stone Age. And he told stories about how he just kept running he was just looking at houses or in houses, and Steve Perry would walk in and go, "This is a beautiful house. What's the price?" And he said that happened to him at least two properties, including one house he owned, that Steve Perry just walked in and said, "How much does it cost?" So the next time you see Steve Perry, maybe you can ask Gerry.
Well, no, I'll turn that over to Dude.
Yeah,
Dude was very
well,
close.
I met Steve way back in the 70s in Marin County up there in the Bay Area where Journey
Nice.
started. And so they were always around, and I met him literally like in a bookstore or something, and we stayed friends all these years. And we don't see each other as much as we used to, and I moved around and he did stuff, but
Right.
that might be a hobby. I have a friend, another friend who that's his deal. He and his wife just love to go look at houses for sale, like window shopping for clothes or something. They go to houses let's go look at some of these houses that are for sale. For whatever reason, they're compiling data or planning on their own move, although
Or
they know.
Dreaming.
good cookies.
Yeah.
Usually there's good chocolate chip cookies at house showings, so they might be cookie
Oh,
connoisseurs.
that could be a motive.
That's a good idea. I love a good cookie.
Yeah, Jerry does love a good cookie. From the writer from the get-go. Where are the
That's my
cookies?
first
Exactly.
question. I wasn't asking about the room. I'd call Trav, the guitar tech. How are the cookies?
Yeah.
That's what writers are for. But I have two questions and then I'll let you go. And the first one, another pop culture stronghold that America has is your greatest hits album was drawn by Phil Hartman. And most people didn't realize that Phil Hartman was this talented visual artist. Around what year or era do you remember that people started gushing over that?
I do remember, first of all, Phil Hartman was, rest in peace, was the brother of John Hartman, our manager at the time. And Phil, he was doing the Groundlings in LA, which was a comedy improv troupe. He hadn't been obviously hired by SNL. So he was making a living as a graphic artist and doing all of the work at
Hartman
at
Goodman.
Phil Hartman Goodman at the office, including the famous Poco logo and a bunch of other CSN, the overlapping CSN logo he did. So that's how we met him, but he was always on, wasn't he, Du? He was incredibly always
remember
doing
being in
voices
office.
and caricatures and stuff.
Yeah, he was always exactly just like you're saying. He was always had a bit going, a little humor deal. He could
Like a
lighten
Robin Williams kind of thing where, you
Yeah.
know,
lighten up the room. Not quite as manic as Robin Williams, but another one, rest in peace. They're both gone now. But
Yeah.
Phil, he was a really great guy, and he'd come to shows. And as Jerry said, his older brother John was our manager. So, and in those days, the management office was the same when we were with Geffen and Roberts. The offices themselves were kind of a hangout. Other musicians, they had a stable of artists. It was always great to got nothing to do, go down and hang around the office.
Crosby Nash, Dave and Graham,
Yeah, they were
Just
down
saw
there.
Graham in Sydney, a fantastic show. There, there's Graham Nash. We were huge fans of the Hollies, before CSN. So I hope you understand the kind of decades that we're talking about here of devotion,
Yeah.
Yeah,
It was
the
just
recurring theme of our conversation is just America knows everybody. America's been everywhere, yet is humble about the whole thing.
Well,
Well,
a lot more important things
we
than
never,
but
I think
very
because
proud.
I like to think, and I've said before, because Jerry and I met in high school and it was in a British American high school in England,
Right.
where kids of Air Force families, there were civilians too. We were all kind of thrown in this bucket together, and everybody's from different walks of life, different places, had been stationed in different cities and around the world. So we had this unique kind of bonding there above and beyond the music. The music certainly was, first time I ever saw Jerry was he was playing his Beatle bass in a band at one of the high school functions. But from then on, I think the fact that we were friends and then met Dan, of course, it had a larger element than just making music together. And so I think we always if it is humbleness, we certainly didn't take ourselves too seriously from the get-go, and we worked well together, I think. So I think it's great that we still feel that way. It never really changed. We, we always seem to get along. Obviously, you would discuss projects, and sometimes Guy would have a different opinion on a song or a take or something, but that was minimal. We always seemed to go with each other's flow, and the projects I think, reflect that cohesiveness.
We know so many, as you mentioned, we know virtually everybody in the business. We've gigged with everybody over the years. And I think I would like to add that Dewey and I realize how fortunate we are, because there are countless examples, and we never name names, of people that they just don't get along at all. They're kind of yoked together because they're in the same band, but they don't talk to each other. So it isn't like we just, isn't this how it always is? You know, we know how important that has been to our strength and our dynamic, because we've seen the other side of it, and that other version is nowhere near as fun as the fun we've had.
And
Unfortunately, yeah, most of my favorite bands, the key members do not speak with each other, whether or not they're touring together. No need to name names, but my last question, being mindful of your time for both of you, and I'll throw it to Dewey first. America, the music itself is generally relaxing, and I mean that in a good way, not a boring, mellow way, a melodic, exciting kind of way. But how do you relax in general? Do you have a key to decompressing after you played a gig? And Gerry, I also want to hear an answer to that if you have one.
Well, if you ask my wife, I never relax. She's always saying, settle down, because I get busy around the house too much. And we recently moved,
Sure.
which triples the, I have this to do, I have that to do, we got to get that fixed, we got to call someone in for this or that. And she insisted I slow down a little bit more. But I mean, I do like listening to audiobooks. I listen to music too. I like kind of tying the music into a biography of that artist. Like I mentioned, the uh, uh, Van Morrison book I'm reading now, which is more than just a Van Morrison book. It's all about the year 68. But I love the history of music, and I love the history of our era of music. I'll go back to jazz times and things, and through the 50s, but primarily I'm fascinated, like I said, just talking about Karen Carpenter or some of these other artists. I actually get a lot of relaxation out of that. I've always liked documentaries and biographies a little bit more than fiction anyway.
Same here, yeah.
So that is, if I'm going to stop myself from going out in the yard and fixing something, or unpacking boxes, which we're still doing, by the way, here at this house, then that's what I would do for relaxation. And we watch TV a lot, like everybody. We're slaves to the box.
Sure. Gerry, same question at you. The final words of this chat?
Well, relaxing is a challenge sometimes. I've said to my wife and my friends, I think I'm unique in that I don't have a bored gene. I understand when people are bored, and I've seen it, and and I know I'm somewhat of an outlier in that regard. The closest I think I can feel is maybe tedium. If we're at an airport and there's a 3-hour delay on a flight, it's not boredom that would rise up. It'd be tedium, like, oh, I got to ride this out. But
Yeah.
I'm a reader. I read constantly. I study film. I love watching great films. The time that I've now had by not being on the road quite as long, I'm going through the Criterion collection of the top 100 films of all time. I'm watching films that you've always said, oh, I've got to see that someday. I now have the luxury of doing that. I'm halfway through Proust. God forbid. So I just don't have a boredom thing. So that doesn't really answer your relaxing. Like Dewey, I love to put on a podcast or something. I listened to a BBC4 one called In Our Time, just by Melvin Bragg. And much as I love those, and they can be all over the board, they'll also be quite effective at not knocking. So I suppose they're relaxing in a way,
Perfect answer. Thank you, gentlemen, for the decades of great art. Hope there's more archival stuff coming, but if not, hey, we have plenty to listen to, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Nice talking with you. Good to see you again, Dew.
Thank you. See you, Jer.
Paltrocast.